Welcome everybody to part 2. This is going to be a little more like a round table, a little less formal, and we're going to allow you to openly ask some questions as we go through some of this. I want to take a minute and do a little bit of a refresher on some of the topics that we discussed in our meeting part 1 on Tuesday. And as we're going through some of that reminder, refresher on those topics, I'm going to actually start the discussion off with asking you a couple of questions. So I'm going to go ahead and start through the process of going through the presentation. You all know who I am, Babel Health. We are a risk adjustment submission platform, and our focus is more than just getting data packaged up in a specific format and delivered to the government agency that you're doing your reporting to. Our platform is really an end-to-end platform that supports plans or BPO service groups with truly an end-to-end view on their book of work. From the inception of the encounter submission through the effects of those submissions on your risk program. And so we do have a different view at the end of the day and provide, I think, a much more advanced tool set than most for managing that book of work. We are a multi-platform supporting technology, and the team that we have collaboratively has many more years than myself included of experience in this book of work, and we come together united to provide a product, I think, that offers a lot of value in the industry. But our focus is not necessarily so much on Babel and our tool sets and what we have to offer, but on you and the challenges that you guys have as plans, getting your data, clean data into the government agency that you're doing your reporting for. And so we really want to take a minute and look at what we think is the primary gap that causes the challenge in getting clean data into your reporting agency. We want to look at rethinking the correction process and the top level mistakes that contribute to that lost revenue. We want to talk a little about the technology, and then we want to talk through how to tackle some of the most challenging problems and errors that you have. Again, we have here the QA and summary at the end, but again, I'd like to make sure that if you have a question that you could raise your hand and ask it dynamically throughout the product. So if the behind the scenes folks supporting this presentation, if we could make sure that attendees have the ability to ask their questions, that would be really wonderful. All right, so let's move on. I want to have you think as we go through this in terms of what are your pain points related to sweeps and state reconciliation quality checkpoints in your programs. Do you have more errors in your error pool than you can manage? Do you have errors that you don't know how to resolve? Anesthesia, eligibility, NPI, those types of errors. Do you have provider management issues, systemic problems with your providers? And are you in general just dealing with the loss of revenue due to their problems? I want you to think about what is your most challenging problems in your programs. And as we talk through and do a review of the presentation from Tuesday, how can we help? Whether it be providing insight, industry experience, or is there information that you would like to to bring up to talk about today. That's really the target of this, is how can we help you with those challenges that you have. So let's jump right on in. The gap that we're talking about, that we know have, through our experience, causes the errors that prevent you from getting your data submitted, is the difference between what your claims payment system and your claims processing team has defined a clean encounter to be. Clean enough to pay doesn't always mean clean enough to report. And so there is the gap in the overall scheme of how plans manage when you have a focus of getting your claims paid to keep your provider network happy. Sometimes there is either a cognitive circumventing of the rules that define a clean claim. From a reporting perspective, maybe it's an oversight, and maybe it's just a lack of communication between the two, and understanding, or even a lack of technology supporting the two groups in order to guarantee that what is defined as a clean claim in your from the programs that you're supporting, the government agencies that you're reporting to, versus a clean claim to pay. And so that's where we really get into problems in that we process the payments and we get the payment out the door, but we don't necessarily have the ability to get it reported into the government agency. So that's the challenge, and of course that means a loss of risk revenue to the plan, because you may not always get those encounters cleaned up in time for submission, because after the fact, the churn that it provides to the provider, or not wanting to rock the boat with your provider out there. So there are some challenges that doing this after the fact. So we've also talked on Tuesday about how it's not really known. A lot of times the plan isn't aware, your claims processing team isn't aware of what the true cost is of those errors to the plan. And so we talked about how they can calculate and an average perspective. If you know that the average across the board HCC payout is $2,000, and you know that the average HCC is 1.5 per member, and you can translate that into the volume of members and the volumes of claims that you have, what is the potential for lost revenue across the plan if you don't get 10% of your encounters cleanly submitted into the government agency, using, of course, the risk model associated with CMS. And I know you guys have state programs and marketplace and duals programs, but if we focus specifically on CMS for the moment, and the sweep coming up in September, that can correlate into some big dollars for you as a plan. And so educating everybody within your plan on what the true impact is, this can be daunting. It can be a challenge, and in fact, it's not very realistic to expect anybody to change without really a good reason for change. And I didn't share in too much detail about a historical experience that I had when I was the manager for encounter reporting and responsible for millions of encounters getting cleaned up. I went to, and my counterpart in the claims processing group, I set up a meeting and in a very naive way met with them expecting, hey, we've detected this problem. It's causing downstream impacts in encounter reporting, and we need to address it. And I got met with contention and an unwillingness to change processes. And that was my fault because I wasn't strategic in my communication. I did not provide an adequate reason to motivate change. And if I'd gone back with, this is what it's costing us as a company and our clients as a plan, clients and plans, because we're not correcting those. And there's a different motivational message there. And so it would have been a more effective communication had I been strategic in my communications. So if engaging the resources within your plan to motivate change is a challenge, and it may be, then engaging your financial guys, and some of you are the financial guys in this meeting, looking at what is your book of work and the errors that you have in your book of work costing you, and then using that as a platform to communicate change is a more effective way, because the same place, same thing syndrome does dictate, and we're all so busy and we all have lots of things to do. So combating that mindset of this is the way we've always done it and I don't understand why we need to change mentality is more effective when you have some dollars to support that motivational change message. The other thing is there's a lot of thought process that, you know, if we have errors in our pool, then we're actually making float off of those that aren't paid. We're also maybe might make some additional money by reprocessing those. And the truth is the cost of repairing them and the money's gained in float because you're not paying them out immediately don't always equate the loss of revenue that you get from the risk program, nor does it always equate the loss of standing within a Medicaid program if you're not making your quality numbers. So there's some challenge to that thought process and rethinking the mindset on how you approach encounters processing and actually approaching the whole method of error correction. So this is just an example of a business case that you could be putting together, the actual dollars associated with the errors that you have in your book of work. But again, working up that strategy is going to be very unique to you as your business and the resources that you have at your fingertips. Make those changes. So I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to pause and I'm going to ask if there are any questions at this point or any insight or observations that anybody would like to bring up before we move on into the next piece. Okay, silence is golden. We can move on, and if you have some other ideas or some thoughts, we can bring them up at the towards the end in the QA session as well. So during the Tuesday meeting, we also talked about detecting which is the most impactful encounter to correct for your risk adjustment program. And a lot of folks don't realize a lot of the encounter reporting groups target the encounters with the biggest dollars, and those may or may not result in the most effective impact to your risk program, because sometimes it's the office visit that's sitting in an error state, or some other type of encounter that has a greater risk impact because of the HCCs that are associated with that encounter. And the truth is, our encounter processing and our claims processing teams, they don't know what an HCC is, or they are not familiar with what to do with that and how to target error correction. And in lots of the software supporting platforms that are out there for encounter submissions don't necessarily incorporate the risk impact in the determination of the errors that are out there, and how do you arrange your book of work so that you clean up things that are most important for you as a plan financially. And so incorporating the education into the groups that are managing this work for you is will help impact. And so the answer to this is, you know what, a question on the screen is, it depends. It depends on which HCCs will have already been captured and submitted to the government agencies, and it will also depend upon I should say it also being able to tackle all of those HCCs and not just one single instance of those HCCs with some of the new risk payout methods that are coming down the pipe for 2020. It all begins to make much more of an impact to know which of the encounters actually have HCC impacts and get them clean. So we're, as a group of folks, have to rethink and the way we prioritize. So, and we need to ask ourselves, can we easily quantify which of those encounters clean up that have the most financial impact? And how do we do that? And how do we know that we're cleaning up everything and not just one of many, but everything that will actually have an impact on our risk scores and our quality assurance measures that we have out there. And so, so in rethinking those, it all depends upon you as a plan and what type of technology you have available to you. If you have a group of business analysts that are, and your data is readily available for you to pull out and to pull into a SQL table, or if you can pull it into even Excel, depending upon your volumes, and do some analysis of that data ahead of time so that you can properly strategically prioritize this data that are sitting in an error state for you. Then if you have that available to you, then that's great. And what I want to do is encourage anybody on the call to go out and grab the CPT code, HCPCS code list that CMS has identified as risk eligible. If your target cleanup and your priority is the sweeps that are coming up this September, then it's critical for you to have this information so that you can cross-reference what you have sitting in an error state against this list and really only target cleanup of those encounters that are going to have are eligible for risk impact. And even if you don't have the technology that you can throw this into a SQL to do analysis with, just getting that from CMS and being able to become familiar with those procedures, which are ones that they are saying qualify your encounters for risk, then you have a better idea of how to target the data that you have sitting out there right now that you need to get cleaned up for the sweeps that are in September. When you download that actual list, you see it's pretty simple. It's 3 columns. It gives you a code, a short description, and whether it's included in the risk adjustment. So it would be very easy to integrate this information into a SQL table or into even your claims processing so that you can begin to flag your data as it comes in from the various providers that you have out there as being risk eligible. The published and maintained by CMS, and you can go out to the link and download it, and you have it available. If you don't have the ability to target specifically by using SQL to review, here's a rule of thumb. I mean, for cleaning up for the CMS suites, we know that there are definite encounters that are not included in those suites because they are risk reimbursed through a different program. And so institutional home health, skilled nursing, inpatient rehab, and hospice, those are all reimbursed through different programs with CMS and aren't usually incorporated into your risk. So if you're looking to say, I've got too much I have to tackle my cleanup, I really want to just get to the ones that are going to have the most impact, take these and set them aside and work on the other ones. Now, I'm not saying don't clean these up. I'm simply saying prioritize them after you tackle the ones that you need to get cleaned in and submitted in to CMS before September. Transportation claims too. They tend to cause a lot of problems. Whether they are emergent or non-emergent, they don't qualify for risk, so don't mess with them until after sweeps. And laboratory diagnostic imaging, all bill types, the various bill types, they also are not necessarily eligible for risk, although your pathology encounters those are. So if you need to look those up, those CPT codes up, you'll find that they are incorporated into the eligibility list that's published by CMS. So if you have any questions, is this a lab or is this pathology, you can always look against that list and make that determination. But if it's not going to directly affect your risk program, just set it aside and clean them up after you finish the push for sweeps. So that should help. If you've got, it's a simple math, 1,000, and you've got 200 of those fall into that category, you can put those aside, and now you have fewer to tackle in your cleanup process. And then the next step would be to take a look at those that actually may have impact on your risk program, but which ones are going to directly be related to HCCs. And we talked about this on Tuesday. You want to take a look at the diagnosis codes in there and get familiar with the HCC list that is out there. So it's easy to spot check diagnosis codes and say, you know, gosh, any diagnosis code that starts with a C it's going to be cancer related. So those are going to be better to tackle than bronchitis or something else. So you can take a look at those and prioritize those which we're calling some bucks and no bucks, and then take the ones that will actually offer some risk payout and separate them into big and little based on the hierarchical codes that are associated with the diagnoses. Now, at the encounter cleanup level, the people who are hard at work reviewing your data and doing error correction against those, giving them these tips without getting into extensive training on how to calculate risk and know precisely which one's going to be impactful. These are just rules of thumb which will help govern their activities and help you come out better off for it if you can. So those are the helpful hints. Again, the biggest and the best way to prepare for any sweep or any quality period is to prevent your errors from happening to begin with. So looking at the top 10 errors in the industry that we are being told are being detected and sent back to plans across all plans. These are the most common mistakes, and they do, of course, result in lost revenue if you don't get them corrected and get them submitted into the government. And so simple things like maintaining your procedure codes and your modifier lists and making sure your system data is kept up to date. So things don't get paid that have the wrong procedure code or use of modifiers in them because the list wasn't maintained. So know who it is who keeps that updated in your system and make sure it's done. And if you have a system that doesn't actually check dates of service against effective dates, then look at what the cost of getting that technology built into your system and get it implemented in the logic so that it's not just enough to make sure that it's a valid code. It's got to be valid for the period of time that the date of service on the encounter is being processed. So take in an extra step, check those dates, and then kick it back to the provider to have them readdress that procedure code before it comes into your system for payment. And then it will go through the process and deliver to your agency without an issue. Enrollment, everybody gets various levels of enrollment information. Some of you get MNP and duals. Some of you and your 837s get your MMRs for your CMS submissions, state enrollments information. When you have an ACA plan, you get an acknowledgement through an 834 on those members who are enrolled in Marketplace and the QHPIDs associated with them. All of those across the board, incorporating into your claim system the active enrollment span so that when claims come in, you can cross-reference the enrollment data and make sure that when you're reporting your encounter out the door, you're paying your encounter, you're paying it for an active period of coverage, and that all the information, date of birth, and enrollment start and end dates align with the actual claim that you're paying. So that, again, this is not something that we should see, and yet it's number 2 in the overall errors that we're seeing come back from the Common Electronic Data Interchange Group. That's across all platforms, not just the CMS submission. So it's a pretty big one. Incorrect or missing billing provider data. Again, there's the MPES database. You also have to pay them, and I'm sure you're paying them, through electronic format. So the information should be there, and if you can't integrate it at the time you're paying them, like if the non-PAR provider and it's coming in and you're trying to get it paid quickly. There are resources for checking it out, but if you're not currently integrating your data claims processing system with doing lookups in the MPES database, then you should be moving towards that because that will eliminate some of the churn that you have and some of the missing data that you have. And then, of course, dates of service. Those are typically transpositions or some easy things. So there you have the top 4 that you can target. Now, before we move on, I want to ask, does anybody have any questions on any of these before we move into the next part of our discussion? Okay. So the biggest challenge I think that most plans do get is when they do send data in dirty to the government agencies, that they get some kind of bizarre and cryptic error message back that it's hard to interpret in terms of what does that mean? What does that mean to me? How do I clean it up? And so the key here is looking for actual technology that supports that and makes that user friendly for you, so it's less guesswork. But if you don't have that, then there are a couple of places out there that you can go to find that information. There is, CMS has a common edit data interchange lookup page or tool that if you go out to the link in the presentation, you can plug in the error that you got at the 277 and it will actually bring back an explanation of what the error is. If this is not something that you have available or wish to use it because it's one-off, there's also a spreadsheet that is available that you can download from cms.gov. That spreadsheet also provides the 999 and 277 errors that are applied, and you can filter that on this specific data set. So if you wanted to look up all of the potential errors that could happen with a billing provider NPI or occurrence code span 1 or whatever it is, you can actually pull up this spreadsheet and in Excel and apply your filters and filter down on a specific element of your data and look at and understand what those rules are as they apply to that specific element and how do you fix the error that you've received on them. So it's a very handy tool, and you have a professional and institutional spreadsheet that you can download and reference there. So again, great resource for you guys to begin to dig into understanding what are some of these rejects mean and how do I tackle them. Leading into the very Q&A part of this presentation, again, I'm going to ask folks, what are your pain points and how can we help you with them? And maybe you've had a chance to rethink how things work in your organization, and if you want to talk through some of those, I want to open up the floor and let you guys ask any of the questions that you have. So open mic. Anybody have anything they want to talk about in terms of problems that they've seen in their organization and how we can help you with them?
Come on, folks, don't be shy. If you stump the pro, you get a free demo of Babbel's technology. There's got to be something out there that's bothering you, other than Lisa's presentation.
All right. Well, I'm going to say I'm glad that you all attended today, and I hope that any of the information that we provided to you is going to be helpful within your organization. If you have some specific questions that you want to take offline, you can definitely reach out to myself. You can reach out to Teague or as well, and and I'm sorry, I'm thinking Tracy you might have Tracy's communication but you may not. Please feel free to ask us, and what we will do is we can schedule some one-on-one time, talk through some of your challenges. I'm hoping that this is helpful. If again, in the future, if you have anything you need, please reach out and we'll hear some support you. I think that's it.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Folks, thank you all for attending. And again, if you do have questions, feel free to ping me or Lisa directly. We'll send you our contact information, and we can set up some one-on-one time with you. Okay, folks, have the rest of the day. Thanks. Bye-bye.